welcome to our sixth installment of Ask a Chef, a series brought to you by Prairie Food Co-op and Culinary Confidante. Prairie Food Co-op is a community-owned grocery store that will provide a marketplace for as much locally and sustainably produced food as possible. We are aiming to open our doors in Lombard, Illinois in the very near future. Culinary Confidante is a culinary education-based business that provides in-home coaching, cooking parties, and workshops. Together, Prairie Food Co-op and Culinary Confidante designed the Ask a Chef series in an effort to demystify the kitchen, bringing the workshop to you. Today's Ask a Chef topic is making the most of pantry ingredients. And I thought that that would be a good topic for today because, first of all, last week, if you caught Ask a Chef last week, we talked about produce, and pantry ingredients are kind of the opposite of produce. Produce is your fresh stuff, and pantry ingredients are the things that are going to be shelf stable. You don't necessarily have to keep them in the fridge. Sometimes you do put them in the fridge once you open them, but then it would be good to have a lot of that kind of stuff on hand for now because you don't want to go grocery shopping as often.
Speak up a little.
Oh yeah, can you not hear me? Sorry. Talk a little bit louder. And so one of the things that I thought might be helpful is to go over what a well-stocked pantry might look like. So there are a number of things that you want to keep on hand regularly. And some simple ones would be like your oils and your vinegars. And so different types of oils. Let me know if you guys can hear me better or if I still need to talk louder. We're working on getting a new microphone for this specifically, which hasn't come yet, because if you have ordered anything online, you'll notice that it's taking a while for things to get there. So yes, hopefully you can hear me well enough. And also, as always, if you have any questions while I'm talking, feel free to chime in, let me know. I will take a break and answer as I go. And okay, so going back to oils, there are lots of different kinds of oils. The best ones that you want to make sure that you have, I always have olive oil on hand and then a vegetable oil. So canola oil, regular vegetable oil, and I like to have a sesame oil. I like toasted sesame oil and coconut oil. The difference between the oils is what you're using it for. So if you're going to fry something, you want an oil that's got a higher smoke point and probably not a lot of flavor, depending on what you're making. If you're making a stir fry, I like to use sesame oil because it's got the sesame flavor. And then olive oil has a lower smoke point, so I wouldn't use that to fry with, but more for like salad dressings, which we did a couple weeks ago. And a vegetable oil would be like a flavorless oil. You might use that in baking as well as frying. So those are the main, and then coconut oil you can get refined or unrefined. And the difference between the two coconut oils, which coconut oil is great for a number of things. It's got a good smoke point for making, we like to make popcorn with coconut oil. And the difference between refined and unrefined is the unrefined is going to have more of that coconut flavor. So if you're making something and you want it to have that coconut flavor, go with the unrefined. And if you don't want the coconut flavor, the refined is not going to have that flavor in there. And a good way to remember that is the more processed it is, it's like the more of the flavor has been removed. So the refined, not going to taste as coconutty. Something I might use coconut oil in would be if I'm making like Thai food or stir fry, anything I want to add a little coconutty flavor to. So then going with oils, vinegars also, I like to have apple cider vinegar on hand, balsamic vinegar, a red wine vinegar, rice vinegar. Those are the main ones. There's so many different kinds, but I'd say with like for a dressing, you can use just about any of those. Oh my gosh, I'm clicking on things I don't want to be clicking on. Just went.
Interrupt you for a second. Back to coconut oils. Is one better for you?
As far as coconut oils or oils in general? I missed that question. As far as, so there's lots of different types of oil. In general, you don't want a lot of oil in your diet. If you regularly follow me, you know that I try to focus on healthy foods. And so, yes, kind of a side note, a tip that I recently started doing is in culinary school you learn that you have to fry everything in oil. You have to saute everything in oil. You can use water too, and not to say you don't need oil to cook ever, but like basic step, add oil to your pan, cook your onions, try adding water, because the water is what's going to keep it from burning. Add a little bit of water, the water is going to cook out, and you can always add a little oil in for flavoring. But back to your question as far as what's healthier, less processed is typically better, recommended. But overall, oil isn't really recommended as part of your diet. I know there's a lot of claims olive oil is healthier. Yes, it's a better choice than canola oil, but in general, I would say limit your oil intake. So.
Thank you, Chef. Another from Jacqueline Hanna. Talk more on smoke point.
Oh,
I use canola as my go-to oil, but I find it smokes fast and I like to cook at high heat, maybe too much so. What would you recommend as a go-to oil for those who do lots of stir-fry and high-temp cooking?
Okay, that's a really good question. Smoke point. So one thing I want to mention too, walnut oil, avocado oil, those are also good choices for health. So smoke point, yes, if you are making, that's one of the reasons that I like sesame oil for stir fries. It's got a high smoke point, and so the smoke point is when your oil starts to smoke. So different oils will start to smoke at different temperatures. If it has a high smoke point, that means that you can turn your heat up a lot higher and it's not going to smoke. If it's got a low smoke point, something like walnut oil or olive oil, that means it's going to start smoking before it gets hot enough for you to fry something in it. And that is something you don't want, because if your oil is smoking, your stuff's going to burn and it's not going to taste good. So sesame oil, peanut oil is also a common one, but I know there's allergy concern there. And then if your oil is smoking when you're cooking, take it away from the heat, turn down your heat. Don't add your stuff if your oil is smoking, because it's going to burn instantly. One way you can reduce the temperatures, you can always add a little more oil, but if you don't need the oil, you don't want to do that. Just turn your heat down, wait a second, it'll come down, then you can move forward with it. And part of that is, if you're making a lot of stir fry, using a wok, that will distribute your heat a little bit better. And I hope that answers your question as far as the smoke point. So the things that have the oils with the lower smoke points, you would use those in things like salad dressings or using it raw. So yes, that was a good question. I love when you guys have good questions. Makes me feel like you're paying attention. And okay, so moving on, we got oils, vinegars, and again, you don't have to keep all of those on hand. They're all good for different things. I like to keep a variety on hand, because you can use them interchangeably, but definitely one or two I would recommend having on hand. And then, so moving on, as far as other things you want to have in your pantry, I have some visuals. Haven't gotten there yet, but I want to show you guys a couple of things. Baking, so flour. I know flour is hard to come by, but if you can find it, you want to have all-purpose flour. If you make bread flour is a great thing to have on hand. And the difference between bread flour and all-purpose flour is the protein content. So bread flour has a higher protein content than all-purpose flour. And then also if you do a lot of baking of cakes and things like that, there's also cake flour, and that has a lower protein content than all-purpose flour. So you can think of it like cake flour, then all-purpose is in the middle, and bread flour is the highest. And when it has more protein, it's going to develop more gluten, and that's something you want. You want that chewiness when you're making bread, as opposed to when you're making cake, you want it to be light and airy, not chewy. However, if you don't have cake flour and you don't have bread flour, all-purpose flour, just like it's called, all-purpose, works just as well for all those things. So you can also use whole wheat flour, which is great. And then sugars, I mean, it's pretty standard, but white sugar, brown sugar, powdered sugar. Powdered sugar you're going to use for icing or frosting. If you use it in cookies, it's going to not give you that crystallized kind of grainy texture, but sometimes you want that in cookies. And then I would also have on hand yeast if you can find it, vanilla, chocolate chips if you like to bake. Baking chocolate and chocolate chips are a little different because baking chocolate is good for melting. Chocolate chips are not good for melting. You can melt them, but they're not going to melt as nicely. And then also a tip, if you're wanting to melt chocolate and use it in a way that you want it to like have a shiny finish, you can add a little bit of oil to it when you're melting it. Super easy way to melt chocolate chips is in the microwave. If you don't want to set up a whole double boiler, just a little bit at a time, stir, 10 seconds, stir, 10 seconds, stir. When I was in college, I actually worked at the confectionery, and that was one of my favorite jobs. We made chocolates. So yes, that's something else I like to do. But so then, in addition to those items, cornstarch is definitely something I would keep on hand. That's great for when you want to make a glaze, and I make a glaze for tofu and a stir fry. If you ever order takeout, that's how they get that shiny, sticky glaze, is cornstarch. And when you do that, you want to make sure you make a slurry, which is basically just take a little cornstarch and a little water in a bowl, cold water, mix it together equal parts, then add it into whatever you're making, because if you throw your cornstarch in your stuff you're making, it is going to clump and not be appealing. And so that would be called making a slurry. It's not cooked, versus making a roux, if you're familiar with that. That's what you do when you make gravy. So just another fun fact.
Interrupt you.
Yes.
From Jeremy Nash.
Yes.
Does dry yeast expire? Any ways of reviving if it's old?
Well, so it will probably have an expiration date on the package, but a good way to see if your yeast is still alive is to put it in some warm water, and the best way to check that is just touch it. You don't necessarily need a thermometer. I want to say if it's like 110. No more than 110 degrees if you do want to use a thermometer. I usually stick my finger in the water. If it feels warm, then it's good. If it's too hot, it will kill your yeast if it is alive. Let it sit in the water. You can add a little bit of sugar, like a teaspoon of sugar. And if after about 5 minutes it starts to bubble, it's alive. And that's usually a step that I do when I'm baking bread. Is to just bring the yeast to life beforehand. That way I know that my yeast is good. Then I add it to my recipe. So yeah, that was a good question. And what was I talking about now? I don't remember. Let's go on to, so after cornstarch, you're going to want to make sure you have baking soda and then also baking powder. If you run out of baking soda, you can substitute baking powder and cream of tartar for that. If you run out of baking powder, you can't substitute that. So that's kind of a fun but also spices. We did a whole thing on spices, which if you're interested in spices, I recommend you go to the Prairie Food Co-op YouTube channel. Check out that Ask a Chef, because we talked all about spices. It was so great. We had so many good questions. But I will quickly go over spices that I like to keep on hand. Salt, both kosher and table salt. Kosher I always use in cooking. Table is the small fine grain stuff that goes on a table, so if you need salt. And then kosher has bigger flakes. You've got more control when you're cooking, and yes, it's a lot harder to oversalt your food if you are salting your food with the bigger granules of salt. So also pepper, fresh, yeah, kosher is king. Fresh ground pepper, great. Cinnamon, ginger, cumin, paprika, and there's smoked paprika. Both of those are great. Red pepper flakes if you want to add heat. Cayenne pepper will also add heat, but a little goes a long way with cayenne pepper. Chili powder is great to have on hand. You can use a lot of pantry ingredients with chili. Turmeric, oregano, basil, nutmeg, fennel, garlic, onion, bay leaf, thyme. Nutritional yeast is one of my favorite things. It's a good way to add a cheesy, nutty kind of flavor when you're not wanting to actually add cheese, which if you follow me, you know that I follow a plant-based diet, so I don't eat cheese. And sage, dill, and then another thing that's great to have on hand are pre-mixed spice mixes. There's no shame in using those. I love them. Curry powder, an Italian seasoning mix, 5-spice, a jerk seasoning, Moroccan seasoning, herbs of Provence, adobo, if you like to make Puerto Rican food, which we do often.
Woo!
As far as sweeteners, I like to keep honey on hand. If you are someone with allergies, apparently if you consume local honey, that will help with your allergies, because the bees are consuming those things that are out in your environment. So that's a fun fact from Beth that I learned. And then also maple syrup is great to have on hand, and date sugar is great if you can find it. There's also corn syrup or agave, but I typically use honey, maple syrup, or dates. Dates are really the only nutritional sweetener that I would recommend to people to use, because all the other sweeteners are basically just empty calories. So, not to say you shouldn't ever use those. I would always steer clear of the more processed things and choose something like honey or maple syrup over the white sugar, but yes, I do use white sugar when I'm baking things sometimes. Canned items. Now is a great time to have lots of canned things in your pantry, so you can limit your grocery shopping. Canned tomatoes, definitely. Canned beans. There's so many things you can do with those. And as far as beans, there are so many types of beans. Chickpeas, also called garbanzo beans. Those are one of my favorites. Very healthy. So many things you can do with them. You can make hummus. You can just heat them up and put a spice mix on them and throw them on a salad. Throw them in a wrap. Lots of things you can do. Black beans, kidney beans. Pinto beans, also called pink beans by the Goya brand, I discovered recently. It's the same thing, because I opened up 2 cans and they were exactly the same. And tomato paste is a good way to add more tomato flavor when you're making a tomato sauce. Just use like a tablespoon. And you can actually take the rest, freeze it in little ice cube trays in the freezer, pop it out, stick it in a bag, and then when you want to cook with it, it's ready to go. And because there's always too much. Like, you never really need a whole can. So that's just a tip with that. And then coconut milk I like to use a lot. Vegetable stock or bouillon. Actually started using vegetable bouillon just because it's more convenient now. I prefer not to use bouillon, but you know.
Let's not talk about stocks.
I know I don't want to get started with stocks. I know we have some stock fans. Okay, so diced green chili is another way to add a lot of flavor to if you want to make some Mexican food. Pumpkin, I know it's not pumpkin season, but that's another great canned item. Lots of nutrition there. Canned fruits, if you want to buy canned fruits, I would just recommend that they are not canned in syrup, lots of sugar, canned in juice, ideally. I knew we'd have some love there from the stacks. But over canned stuff, I would actually recommend frozen fruits, because frozen fruit is actually, it's frozen at the peak of freshness. So you're getting it when it's got the most nutrients possible. Some frozen fruits are actually more nutritional than the fresh fruits, because if you think about the amount of time that it takes produce to go from being picked, which is probably being picked before it's even ready to be picked, it's being picked, potentially then being sprayed with ethylene gas so that it ripens, then it's being transported to the grocery store, then it sits there while people walk by it and feels sad till someone buys it, and then it goes to your refrigerator and then lasts for, I don't know, a few days, depends on how long, but it's had a long journey before it gets to you, and it's not necessarily going to be at its peak ripeness when you eat it. So something like blueberries, I always keep frozen blueberries on hand. And yes, Dana, they are super convenient. That is a great point. But yes, so I definitely, I know we're talking about pantry stuff, but I have to throw a shout out to frozen stuff, because frozen, it'll keep a long time. And my personal preference when I'm shopping is I buy fresh, I buy frozen, and I buy canned. And at a time like, now when you're wanting to not go grocery shopping, yes, frozen mango, also very good frozen fruit. I like to buy, as I said, fresh, frozen, and like canned. And then I would use the items in order of what goes bad the quickest. So go through your fresh stuff, then go through your frozen stuff, then go to your canned stuff. Because your canned stuff isn't going to go bad. There's no hurry to use that. And then when you do get a chance to go shopping, you can use, you can add back to that fresh, reserve, and frozen as well. And the other thing, which we talked about produce last week again, but you can freeze your fresh stuff so that it stays longer. And if you want to put in your pantry, you could dry it as well, or can it. I'm not familiar with canning, but I know a lot of people are. And it's the perfect time to learn, right? So let's get back to what we were talking about. Grains. Here, let's bring in some visuals. So here is, I love these containers. We're talking a little bit about storage. I try to keep a lot of my stuff in containers where I can see what it is, it's appealing, makes you want to eat it, rather than just all these bags or boxes thrown in your pantry. And this is great if you buy stuff in bulk too, which I'm super excited about buying in bulk when Prairie Food Co-op opens. And it's more fun. I have limited storage in my kitchen, and so this really helps with that. I have open shelving, and I've got things all just kind of sitting out where I can see them. And I use a lot of jars like this, and then I just write on it with chalk, whatever it is. And you can use these in the fridge too. And then, so nuts and seeds are also a great thing. I've got almonds. Pistachios are great for snacking. Pecans. Walnuts are my number one nut that I would recommend everyone eat, health-wise. Flax, also another good one. There's golden flax. There's a darker brown flax. I don't know if that is a different name. But then you want to grind it before you eat it, and actually use this to replace egg. You just add a little water, like when you're baking, and works great and super good for you. Pumpkin seeds, that's another good one. What else do I have here? We talked about beans. That'd be another dried thing. You could buy dried or canned beans. I've got lentils. I've got dried chickpeas, and if you've never made canned beans, if you've never made dried beans yourself, try it because it tastes so much better. It seems like such a simple thing, like wow, how could it taste better? It just does. You have to try it. You can either soak your beans overnight, discard that water, and then boil them for like an hour or two, depending on the bean. Or you can throw them in a crock pot and let them cook overnight. Either way works. What else do I have over here? Oh, my favorite, popcorn. We have a very, very large bag of this that we refill this jar with. This is one of my favorite snacks, whole grain as well. Lots of fiber. And groats here. Oh, I have another fun thing down here that I want to forget about. And then in your pantry too, you can keep items like potatoes, onions, but don't keep your potatoes and your onions together because your potatoes will cause your onions to sprout faster. So I keep them separate. I have my onions just sitting out on my counter, actually, not in my pantry. And then, see if I can do it. This is my favorite find. I don't know if you can see this. I like to keep my potatoes and my squashes just in a basket. You know, you want to keep your stuff off the floor, obviously, but I've got a butternut, some potatoes, some sweet potatoes, and I got a big giant squash in here that's too heavy for me to lift out. But that's one of my favorites. And yeah, so also as far as seeds, another good thing would be like butters. So I mean, everyone knows about peanut butter. There's almond butter. There's cashew butter. There's all kinds of those out now. I would recommend you look for the ones that don't have added sugar if possible. And then tahini is actually sesame, just ground sesame. So that is another great one to cook with. Also miso goes in your fridge, but it lasts for such a long time, and it's a great way to add flavor to things. Let's see. So many good things to share. Okay, so a couple of items that would be good to keep in your pantry that'll add a lot of flavor quickly to dishes. I mentioned miso, which actually goes in the fridge, but I thought that was a good one to throw in there. Pesto is another one. Sun-dried tomatoes. You can add pesto or sun-dried tomatoes to pasta. Throw in whatever vegetables you have. If you've got frozen ones, that's great. And then soy sauce is another great way to add flavor to stuff. Hot sauce. And then with hot sauces, there's so many different kinds. There's sriracha, Cholula, Frank's hot sauce, Tabasco, Valentina, and really it's just dependent on the type of pepper. And usually I try to pair the type of pepper with the cuisine. So for Thai food or Asian food, I would use something like sriracha or just red chili flakes because it uses typically like Thai chilies. And then something that has jalapenos would be something I would use for like Mexican food. What else? Capers. Capers are another good thing you can throw into pasta. So like an easy dish would be spaghetti if you've got, you know, some lemon that you threw in the freezer because you watched Ask a Chef Produce last week, which you can find on the Prairie Food Co-op YouTube food channel. That should be a food channel. YouTube channel. That was a lot. We talked about you can blend and peel and freeze lemon. So that's another good tip. But so spaghetti, tomatoes, you can add olives, capers, lemon, and that would be kind of a puttanesca sauce that and some onion, wine. That's a good one with a lot of pantry ingredients. And dried mushrooms, also another good way. You could make miso soup with that. And dried fruits too. You can make a little trail mix with cranberries, dates, raisins, and then all the nuts we talked about, pecans, almonds. walnuts, and yeah. So I know we're closing in on our 30 minutes. Just wanted to give you guys a couple of ideas too about how you can still cook a varied menu during a time of limited grocery shopping. I know a lot of people do their regular grocery shopping and plan for things and buy fresh food all the time, which would be great if I could just go to Prairie Food Co-op right now, and well, in a year maybe, and buy things for dinner. But we're trying to buy as much as we can, shop as little as we can, but still eat food that tastes good and is good for us. So a couple tips that I would recommend is try to plan ahead if you can. You don't have to sit down and plan out every detail of your menu or meals, but if you think about what you want to eat and rotate will you grab my menu planning? Actually, that would be a nice visual. Rotate your starches. So if one night you have potatoes, the next night you could have squash, then you could have rice, then you could have pasta. That'll be an easy way to break things up. You could also rotate your cuisine. So have Asian food one night, Mexican food, American food, Italian food the next night. You could also rotate your type of meal, and this is something I do a lot with lunch. Have a lunch one day, have a salad one day, have a wrap the next day, have soup the next day, and kind of rotate those throughout the week. It takes away some of the guesswork, and that is especially helpful when you're hungry, because you don't want to walk over to the fridge and be like, I'm starving, what do I do? That's when you grab the junk food and the things that you maybe aren't wanting to eat. So if you want to eat differently, you have to plan at least a little bit for it. So, and as far as dinner, different items, you could do grill one night, do a casserole one night, make pasta the next night, and then you can kind of add those things in. So vary the starches, vary the cuisine, vary the type of the meal. And for me, I am a very visual person, so I'm going to show you something personal right now. This is what I do. This is the menu planner that I created. So for example, I didn't actually check to make sure this meets the guidelines I'm recommending you, but like we have rice here, we have pasta here, I have a stew here, we got mashed potatoes here, a polenta, then we have pizza, then we have a chili, which is similar to a stew, and then like for lunch, I've got a salad, leftovers, chickpea tacos, a salad again, tacos again, leftovers. I plan leftovers. It makes my life easy, and then it cleans out the fridge. And this will help you vary your diet. Eat food you like, because when you're hungry, you can be like, what does it say I'm having for dinner? What did I tell myself I'm having? Perfect. Then you cook. I mean, I have come to rely on doing that. So I hope that's helpful. I'm happy to answer any questions about meal planning or anything like that. I do offer that. And that was a huge tangent I hadn't planned on going on. So to leave you with a few recipe ideas I thought might be helpful. Let me see if I think I showed all my visuals. Forgot one last week. Yes, Dana, it reduces food waste to plan. That is a great point. And I was actually thinking that might be a fun Ask a Chef to do, is how to reduce waste. So love to know if anyone is interested in that topic. We very, very rarely throw away any food in my house because I don't let it happen. I plan it out, and so I love that you mentioned that. A couple recipe ideas for you for pantry. Chili, I feel like, is a really obvious one. You can use beans, either canned or dried. You can use tomatoes, spices. I like to use TVP, which stands for texturized vegetable protein. That is, it's dried. You can find it in the bulk bins. Hopefully Prairie Food Co-op will carry that. And it like resembles the texture of ground meat when you make it in chili, and I I like to use it in chili because it is a very flavorful thing, because TBP has no flavor, so you have to make it taste like something. You could also put tempeh in there, which is actually healthier than TBP. TBP is pretty processed. Or if you like meat, you can put meat in there. Miso soup, another super easy one. If you have miso, scallions, dried mushrooms, some tofu, soba noodles, soy sauce, green onions, comes together super quickly. You don't have to let it cook for very long at all. I've made it in like 30 minutes. Very flavorful. My kids even eat it. And yeah, so, and then spaghetti, another super easy one we talked about. You can make a marinara. You can mix it up with different things in your sauces. You can make a white wine sauce. Any kind of pasta, and again, veggie, like, use the veggies you've got. Even the shapes of your pastas. There's also pastas now made out of lentils and chickpeas and soybeans. I've tried all of them, and I think they're all a little different. The black soybean spaghetti was pretty good. I liked that one a lot. And then chickpeas. Buy chickpeas, use chickpeas. You can use them for so many things, and they're so healthy. You can stuff it in a sweet potato. You can make a curry with broccoli. Make hummus. Homemade hummus, so good. You just need like lemon. Okay. You could also make a veggie burger. Did it turn me off or no? Am I good? Okay.
Keep going.
All right. So you can make a veggie burger with beans and grains. You can do, just pick your grain, pick your beans. You could add beets, you can add spices. Lentil sloppy joes, another favorite. Breakfast grains, oats, brown rice, chia pudding. And then the simple ones too, pancakes, waffles, muffins, breads. You can make banana bread, zucchini bread, cookies. And then I like to sub in flax for eggs, and I like to use nut milks in place of dairy, and they come out great. You would never know they're vegan, plant-based. And then there was one thing I missed too. Oh, nut milk. So shelf-stable milks are great for now. You can buy them by the case. You can buy 3 or 4 at a time. Doesn't take up refrigerator space. Throw it in the fridge when you're ready to use it. And yeah, I like soy milk. I think it's got good flavor. Also typically fortified with the most stuff. So, and I think I answered all the questions that I saw coming in. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to let me know. And think that just about wraps up today's topic. So if you do have any questions about today's Ask a Chef or anything else really, Prairie Food Co-op or Culinary Confidante, feel free to reach out through either Facebook page, and myself or someone else will get back to you as soon as possible. Is there a topic that you'd like to see us cover on our next Ask a Chef? We would love to hear from you. Comment on this video or send us a message with your idea. And don't forget to follow Prairie Food Co-op and Culinary Confidante for more content like this. Thank you for joining us, and I hope that you learned something today.
We have a surprise question from Susan Davis. What can you do with shelf soy milk?
Shelf soy milk. You can do anything with it. I put it in, and it's a calling question. You can use it just like regular milk. The only thing that I would caution is if you have a recipe that is savory and you're wanting to substitute a non-dairy milk, like, not the best example, but a real life example, I make macaroni and cheese for my kids sometimes. And with macaroni and cheese, you use butter and you use milk. I would not use soy milk for that because I don't want it to be sweet. So if you're making something where you do not want any sweetness in there, a better option would be to use vegetable stock for that and not the dairy. And then you could always add a little bit more butter, non-dairy butter in my case, or fat or olive oil to up the creaminess factor. and you could also use it in oatmeal. You could add some chia. You could make overnight oats with soy milk. But I use soy milk just the way that anyone would use regular milk. So, yeah, that was a good question. Thank you. And thanks for joining us today.